Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and to be a part of this conversation, especially with the esteemed panelists that I have with us today and all of you in the room. What excites me about inclusive research or the conversations around it, as someone who never thought of themselves as a researcher, never thought of themselves as someone who could do that academic work or that vigorous work. In the past couple of years, I've been working with young Muslim women to create a community-based research project. And these are young women who've experienced family violence. These are young women who have thought that maybe the school system isn't for them. And what's been amazing about it is watching through mentorship, these young women say to themselves, okay, I couldn't make it through university. They were actually, one of them was asked to leave university, but she's in a place where she's doing the research herself because she was tired of, like many of us, being researched about, but not being the ones to hold the information, shape the information, and then also be able to shape the solutions. And I think that's what inclusive research has to be. We have to put women, we have to put marginalized folks in a place where they get to not only name what research issues should be about, what should the question be, but how those methodologies play out. How our communities can be seen, heard, and believed when they're saying, actually, this is the issue. And a good example of that I know is one of the young women in our group, so they had the opportunity to do any research they wanted. And I thought they were going to do about violence, about violence against women. I thought about traditional, like talking about partner abuse. But no, one young woman was like, I want to do it on sports. And we were like, what does sports have to do with violence? And she said, that's how I do my self-care. And I want to talk about access in sports because that's the way I do my self-care. And when I think about research, how do we continue to have the voices of those that are marginalized? And it's not their decision that marginalization happens. It's about how power can control, how oppression plays out in the ways we have interactions, and who has power to have access to funding, who has power to have access to academics, who has power to be seen as an expert on these issues. So inclusive research is about bringing to center those that have been pushed to the margins, as Bell Hooks talks about. We want to create research that is holding space for folks to be able to say the things they need to say, and also to be able to put back to policymakers, to put back to the government, to put back to communities what they need. And that's what I think is the power of today, and how the conversation that we're going to have is how do we create research that really holds space for the communities most needed to have their voices heard. Instead of putting them aside, we put them into the center. So we're going to have 4 amazing speakers here on this panel this morning. I'm going to introduce them one by one. So we have Meb Rashid. Rashid, yes. I asked them all for their perfect ways of saying their name, because as someone who gets called Farah all the time, I don't like it. So Dr. Rashid is a medical doctor at Crossroads Clinic, a medical clinic that serves newly arrived refugees in Toronto. He is the co-founder of the Canadian Doctors for Refugee Care, an organization founded to advocate for refugee access to health insurance, and was on the steering committee of the Canadian Collaboration for Immigrant and Refugee Health, the group that developed an evidence-based guidelines for the assessment of newly arrived immigrants and refugees. He also co-founded the Christie Refugee Health Clinic, a health clinic located in a refugee shelter. He's amazing. He has brought together clinicians across the province in Canada with an interest in refugee health through the Refugee Health Network of Southern Ontario and through a web-based project called the Canadian Refugee Health Network. He was presented with the Award of Excellence from the College of Family Physicians of Ontario. He's also on staff at Women's College Hospital in Toronto and is affiliated with the Department of Family and Community Medicine in the University of Toronto. And then we also have Esther Inyai. Esther mobilizes 3 decades of Dr. Ignati mobilizes 3 decades of advocacy, academic, and lived experiences of disability in her current position as Associate Professor in the School of Disability Studies at Ryerson University. Her scholarship and research typically attend to issues relevant to intimate life. Esther incorporates arts-informed methods and a co-researcher model of knowledge production in her projects, which I'm really excited about hearing about. And Dr. Ignahi along with her colleague Anne Fudge Scormans, is a co-leading a SSHRC-funded project, Making Space, Disability and Intimate Citizenship, an Ontario Ministry of Community and Social Services project, reimagining parenting possibilities. The parenting experiences and expectations of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And we have Laura Lee Gillis from the Rainbow Health Ontario. Ms. Gillis is the coordinator of the research and policy of Rainbow Health Ontario, where she is responsible for supporting the development of LGBT health research in Ontario and for encouraging public policy that supports LGBT health. She supports a network of 40 researchers across Ontario whose work focuses on LGBT health. She hosts networking and skill-building opportunities related to research and public policy for the network, as well as service providers and community members. Previous sessions have focused on getting funding for LGBT research, best practices for LGBT health methods. I keep wanting to put the Q there. Best practices in LGBT health methods, developing effective knowledge transfer for LGBT health research, and understanding public policy. Laura Lee, is a co-investigator on several large team grants, which focus on different aspects of LGBT health. She also works with a team of research assistants and community partners to produce fact sheets which summarize the literature about particular areas of LGBT health. Laura Lee leads RHO's policy initiatives and writes policy briefs about issues that affect LGBT communities in Ontario. Laura Lee is a co-principal investigator on a large-scale Women's Xchange grant, which was funded this year, through Thick and Thin, investigating body image and body management among queer women in Southern Ontario. And last but not least, we have Magda Smolevsky. Yes. We're going to work on this. Dr. Magda is a research director of the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres. She is a recipient of many prestigious awards, including the Melissa Kaufner Award for Feminist Research in Anthropology and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council grant in her academic research in Australia, where she worked with Aboriginal women. Magda looked at their colonial and post-colonial experiences and their present social and cultural conditions, including gender relations. Magda has been a teacher and a mentor to many students at the University of Toronto, teaching courses in medical anthropology, gender studies, spirituality, and research methods, and currently is on the faculty of Royal Roads University in Victoria, BC, as a graduate supervisor. Co-author of Historic Trauma and Aboriginal Healing, published in 2004 by the Aboriginal Healing Foundation, she has worked on the Ontario Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs and provided services as a consultant to First Nations and Aboriginal organizations across Canada, including work on Indigenous education, urban Aboriginal issues, violence against Aboriginal women, healing, and youth leadership. She has also collaborated as a researcher and writer with Omni Television on several documentaries, has 2 poetry books published, paints and experiments with artistic photography. Amazing. So, can we please give a big round of applause to our amazing panel? Can I come up?